pretty bad, I'm afraid, Mike. It's called Devil Doll.
This time we watched Season 8, Episode 18, Devil Doll,
in which Mephistopheles and his doll go uptown.
But first, some follow-up, but actually even before that, Happy Turkey Day!
Happy Turkey Day!
I'm excited to see the Turkey Day celebrations this time around. We talked about it a bit in our last episode, but the fact that they're going to be able to be watched on demand at the Gizmoplex is very exciting, and the fact that people who haven't been able to see any of the Season 13 episodes will get to see two of the nicer ones will be very exciting, so I can't wait to hear what people have to say about that.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be awesome by the time that this podcast drops. People will probably have watched your favorite Catalina Caper already. It'll be beautiful.
Anyway, and it's going to be American Thanksgiving, which is like my favorite holiday. So I like all the Thanksgivings, American and Canadian. I celebrate as many Thanksgivings as I can because being with friends and eating and checking our privilege is a delight.
Certainly. And it's always nice to be grateful for the things that you have.
Yes, exactly. But we got a lot of feedback from our previous episode on Swamp Diamonds, and I wanted to share some of those notes and letters that came in. First off, listener Greg wrote on our Facebook page, quote, "Great episode. The Baywatch episode that the Mads watch is Pure Pressure, Season 3, Episode 9. If you have not seen it, please do. They use the phrase, kids down by the liquor store, a lot throughout the episode. It's hysterical."
Oh my goodness. See, now I didn't think that they were quoting directly from an actual Baywatch show. I thought that was just homage, but it's even better that it can be traced to a specific episode. So definitely thank you, Greg, for pointing out which one of that was. It was great.
All right. Well, listener Brett from Arizona emailed us to say, a longtime listener, first-time emailer.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks indeed. I've been listening lately, he says, and noticed that you refer to Gypsy as GPC. Did I miss something? Is there a specific reason why she's regarded in this fashion? She's always been a favorite of mine.
And mine. And yours.
And mine. She's absolutely one of my favorites. So Joel and company have referred to her as GPC in the latest seasons and on tour, and they've moved over to that because, of course, the original name is a bit of an ethnic slur, or it's complicated as all these things are, but it's a word that has a contentious history and can make some people uncomfortable, even though that is not how it was intended, and nobody's saying that that's how that name was originally intended when it was given to the character. But to avoid us all having to say that as often as we might have to otherwise, they've been using GPC even to refer to her in the past, and we're following suit. Brett also asks, is there any chance of doing the classic episode, The Dead Talk Back, anytime soon? Love that episode and that short. The short is The Selling Wizard, which is about the grocery store freezer cases. It is a delightful short.
Excellent. Is the movie just as delightful, Chris?
I haven't watched the full episode in a while. I think it probably is. I don't know. I'm looking forward to watching it again someday. Maybe we'll do it next year. We'll see.
Ooh.
We'll see. Anything's possible.
If you just believe.
Exactly. We also got a note from listener Amy on YouTube. We had talked about the term Chinese fire drill and the sort of racist origins of the term Chinese and how
that use of the word Chinese.
Yes. That specific use of it to mean confusing. And listener Amy chimes in, if memory serves, Louis Armstrong disdained bebop jazz as, quote, Chinese music when it first came along, which I have seen a lot of people attributing that quote to him, so I'm assuming it's something he actually said. But his opinion may have softened in life, as it did for many. Oh, she adds, Catwomen on the Moon is one of the Peel Jones Riff Tracks movies, and it's a hoot. Ooh. Pretty sure that when Mavis Danton, played by Madeline Kahn, in the rehearsal on the Carol Burnett show, says she was in Catwomen on Mars, it was a nod to that unappreciated classic.
Nice. Oh, I do love a good Madeline Kahn.
Exactly. And a good Carol Burnett, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
I checked in with Sean over at the Fiasco Family Podcast here on Megaphonic because I suspected they would know a thing or two about Catwomen of the Moon, and they described it as, quote, zero subtext. It's just all frightened straight male libido, which is exactly what I suspected from seeing the trailer.
There you go.
So it seems like it could be a fun movie to watch someday.
Someday.
But we have to watch Devil Doll today instead.
Okay, if we must.
Go, go, go.
This time we watched Season 8, Episode 18, Devil Doll. And I wish I had gotten a content warning for sexual assault. I give you one now, so you may prepare yourself as needed if you watch this episode and for any mentions in our discussion on this podcast. The great Varelli has arrived in jolly old England to perform his mystical acts of mesmerism. Ooh. All the guys are suspicious, and all the ladies are scared of the great Varelli. We will see throughout the course of this movie that there are great reasons for both. Intrepid journalist Mark English will reluctantly uncover the secrets behind Varelli's great powers. Varelli has brought his trusted assistant and Hugo, his creepy-looking ventriloquist dummy, who the riffers aptly refer to as a cross between Alfalfa and Alfred E. Newman. The three have a well-received show with hypnotism, ventriloquy, and, well, actually, I think that's it. The hypnotism involves making grown men fear for their mortal lives, which is super unsettling. And the ventriloquy involves Hugo getting up and walking around while Varelli remains seated. Which, a creepy doll with its own locomotion? Ugh. Mark is determined to know how it all works, so he puts his, girlfriend, Marion, in danger, of course, to find out. Varelli recognizes her as a very rich, attractive woman, and she dances under his hypnosis, and his prey is selected. Good work, Mark. While Varelli is distracted at Marion's aunt's charity party, Mark sneaks into his room and undresses the doll, removes the head, replaces it, which, given we have hints that the doll is sentient, is super sketchy. Ugh. Hugo later visits Mark and gives him a tip to investigate 1948. Turns out the investigative journalist didn't think to look into Varelli's past. He's great at his job. In an even more disturbing turn of events, Varelli takes this overnight party opportunity to call hypnotized Marion to his room so he can sexually assault her while she's under his control. He even makes several comments about how she's going to have to, quote, learn to respond. He is gross. This is awful. And thankfully our riffers point that out because ew, 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 ew. Knowing that his girlfriend is under the control of Varelli the rapist, Mark travels to another country to learn of his secret past. In a fun racist turn, we learn that Varelli learned to control and even suck out people's souls while studying in Egypt, India, Burma, and with llamas in Tibet. If the enslavement of Hugo's soul, the killing of his assistant, or the assault of Marion wasn't enough of a clue, just let me spell it out. The devil is not the doll. In the dramatic conclusion to the movie, Hugo decides Varelli is not the master anymore and wrestles him until their souls switch places. Mark walks in and Hugo, now in Varelli's body, assures him that everything will be fine because Varelli is now in the wooden dummy locked in a cage. So at last, the devil is the doll. Yay! The end.
Meanwhile, on the satellite of love, Tom and Crow have installed a window on the desk. It's just a pane window. There's no wall around it. It's just a window. But now they can live out their fantasies of throwing open the window, putting speakers into the window, and having a Friday night dorm party. Except they spent all the money on the fine Anderson window and have no money left for a stereo or alcohol or food or anything. Maybe Tom should try to get a refund on that window. Meanwhile, remember how we're in Roman times? Our Roman hosts are throwing a little get-together so everyone can meet Apurlo and Brain Gaius, but the party is far too boring. Pearl suggests instead a toga party. But it's Roman times, so they're already wearing togas. Okay, how about a pants party? Back on the ship, the nanites have a microbrewery. Get it? And now Crow is drunk and crying out for Debbie. He punches the window in for her, but it's unlikely to bring Debbie back. And all that before we watch any movie. However, inspired by the first part of the movie, Crow makes a deal with Pitch to buy one of those sweet devil dolls. Crow thinks he's found a great bargain, but Mike runs in and puts the kibosh on any soul selling. And after some more movie, Tom and Crow have set up a British-style pub and are putting on terrible British accents. Mike tries to pour himself a quick beer, but it comes out of the tap thick and sludgy and... Look, this isn't actually a very good sketch. Let's just move on. Anyway, now Pitch is helping Crow transfer Tom's soul into a puppet Tom. Tom is excited and wonders if he can be transferred into a toaster strudel. And sure enough, he can. A toaster strudel with some killer gams. After the movie, Crow is pretending to be the great Varelli, and he's made Mike up to look like Hugo the Dummy and put him in a cage. Sure. And back in Rome, we're wearing pants to a gladiator fight, and the gladiator, known as the Mad God, is Professor Bobo. What do you think, sirs? Hey, it's Season 8. What did you think of the Season 8 episode?
I have mixed feelings about this one. As you can probably tell by my movie summary, I am not okay with this movie. Not in any sort of a way. I think the riffers, did an okay job with it, though, right? There were good riffs throughout. I thought they were pointing out some of the really terrible parts of the movie. I mean, terrible content-wise. They weren't just letting that sort of stuff go. The sketches were okay, I guess. I don't know. I like Pitch. But it certainly wasn't a favorite for me. I don't think I ever want to watch that movie again. And I'm surprised that this was one of the movies that they brought back for a revamp. I just don't think that there's any reason why this movie needs another shout out in any capacity.
I didn't find the movie as bad as you did, though I'm fully acknowledging all the things that you found upsetting about it. But they didn't upset me as directly, even though I think they're gross and icky. I can sort of separate that and make that part of the movie experience, part of the sort of fiction experience.
Fair enough.
And so it doesn't completely get under my skin in that way. And that's just where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to invalidate your feelings.
No, I wouldn't suspect that you would be. But yeah, this was definitely one of the things where I'm just like, there are plenty of movies from the 50s and 60s that also depict sexual assault as if it is not any big deal.
Yeah.
And I have to acknowledge that the movie is in no way saying that Varelli is a good person, right? The movie at every turn is making him seem creepy and suspect. So it's not as if they're putting him forth as this great guy, and sure, but I just don't need to see that. I just don't.
Fair enough. I think I've seen other people say this, that they have somewhat fond memories of the movie, but that the episode kind of washed off them. And I think that they did an adequate job with the riffing. I wasn't upset during it. It made the movie go down smoother. But that they kind of thought that the movie wasn't as bad as the riffers make it out to be.
Oh.
And I think, again, setting aside your tolerance for depictions, really explicit depictions of sexual assault, the movie, I think, benefits from the riffing.
Oh, hugely.
I think this is one of those movies, much like Girls Town, which is where I first noticed this, so it's always going to be associated with Girls Town for me, where the movie is probably really draggy if you watch it on its own and just incredibly badly paced.
Oh my God, I was thinking that as I was watching it, because I'm just like, if these riffers weren't saying stuff right now and pointing things out, I don't think there's been a line said by any of these actors inside of the last 3 or 4 minutes, which seems really, I mean, it seems like so many movies that this was just a plumped out possible Twilight Zone episode that they had to pad with scenes of exotic London ?
Yeah, exactly. But you get this paradox where because the riffers are making jokes during the many, many quiet parts, it feels better paced as a movie. And so you walk away thinking that it is a better movie than it actually is in terms of that side of things.
Yeah, I have to say, I would never want to see this unriffed. I mean, I don't even want to see it riffed again because of the content. However, I would never have wanted to see this unriffed. Oh my goodness, it's so slow. So slow. So little dialogue.
I would also not really have wanted to see it unriffed, but I did walk away thinking that this was a better movie than they thought, and I'm just examining that. And also, like, having walked away from the episode of Girls Town thinking, actually, I would like to see that unriffed, and then trying it and then saying, oh no, I've made a terrible mistake. This movie
Sure.
not nearly as charming without our friends there. Yes.
Which speaks to the great things that they're able to do when they're inside of the theater. They really do change the way that you look at a movie. And I do appreciate that. I think and that's a testament to how good of a job they were doing during the course of this movie, that you didn't find it as awful as it probably really is.
So the trailer for this movie suggests, quote, "You will learn the dummy's sinister secret only at the very end of this most unusual suspense thriller. But for maximum shock sock, see it from the beginning."
What?
So, did you get maximum shock sock from this movie?
Yeah, no, clearly not. As evidenced by my movie summary.
I'm not even 100% sure what they're talking about here.
I mean, are they suggesting that he was the dummy all along? Because quite frankly, the dummy just seems like he is trying to get out of the control of this really horrific man.
The idea that the dummy is a person who's been trapped inside this body is telegraphed incredibly early in the film.
Yes.
And confirmed about halfway through or so.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't know what the sinister secret is that's revealed at the very end.
Yeah, because we knew that he could open doors way earlier than that. And that seemed sinister at first. Yeah, I don't know. And he creeps up on people when they're sleeping. That's a little sinister, but it doesn't happen at the end of the movie. Is it just that he can fight a full-grown man and transfer souls? I don't know what the secret is. And what does it have to do with socks?
Well, I think they mean sock in the sense of sock it to me, as in
I know,
punch.
But that's pretty funny.
Okay. I don't know if you know this, but the 50s sock hop was actually just an excuse for people to jump around and punch each other.
You know, I wouldn't put it past the 50s at this point.
I didn't really love the sketches in this one, I have to say.
Fair enough. I don't know. Yeah. I hardly know what to say about the sketches. I mean, the toaster strudel was fun. The toaster strudel
doll is very good.
And coming into the theater for them for the entire portion of the movie after that was fun.
Yeah, no, definitely was fun hearing Mike carrying Tom in as he normally does and being like, he says something to the effect of like, oh, he's just weird holding you when you're like this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the big square shape moving back and forth. I think it was a fun day to be Kevin Murphy.
Yes, totally, definitely. So that part of it, like, I enjoyed that part of it, certainly. But I don't know. I'm also not really getting into Roman times. Maybe it's me. I don't know. Roman times doesn't seem to be, Pearl doesn't seem to be having a good time with it. Brain Gaius doesn't seem to be having a good time with it. There's a lot of talk of pants in the riffing, in the sketches that involve the Romans. And, it's always amusing to me when they talk about how awesome it is to have pants, considering there's a whole ode to pants that Tom sings. So
yes.
Love anytime pants come up. Pants, pants, pants.
Well, we only have a few more episodes in Roman times to deal with.
Okay, cool. Because they just they just seem bored where they are.
Yeah.
At least they finally found Bobo, so now things can start progressing, which was why they were there in the first place. So
I guess. We'll see. Now, we talked about hypnotism a bit when we talked about another season 8 episode. I say we, it was me and Adam. But when we talked about the undead in episode 76, I talked about my experiences with hypnotism. So I think we're not going to talk about that this time. But we might want to talk about dolls, ventriloquy dolls, and other creepy dolls.
I think that's totally appropriate. I did kind of tease inside of our last episode that I own a creepy doll, which I, refer to as the creepiest doll in the universe, scariest doll in the universe.
I mean, it is a contender, having had to share a house with this doll at one point in my life. We talked about back then, we were living in like a place that had a little attic window, and of just setting a little rocking chair and a light to be on the attic window. We were living on a relatively major thoroughfare at that point, and just like people driving by and seeing this haunted doll face in the attic.
Oh, yes.
Oh, we could have caused some traffic accidents right outside of our front lawn.
It is probably for the best that we did not. I mean, for those of you guys, this doll is one that was made for my grandmother in, I don't know, like the teens or the 20s. It has the very white complexion, almost like a Cupid doll face, but more like in that teens and 20s style, if you've seen dolls made in that era. Originally, it had eyelids that opened and shut when you moved it. Although by the time that I owned the doll, the eyelids opening and closing that feature had broken. And so when my mother, who owned the doll before me, had it repaired at some point in time, they glued the eyes open. So now the eyes of this doll are open all the time. And it's got the like teeny, tiny red lips, and it's got the like rosy cheeks, and it has hair that is made from my grandmother's first haircut. So the hair is actual human hair from my grandmother. And it has, the little lace-up Victorian boots that came with it. And it has like, its creepy little baby hands and everything. And it is a doll. It is a doll. When my kid, when he was younger, had friends come over, he would bring kids into the room with the doll, and they would all come out screaming. So,
Of course.
This is a doll that has been part of the experience of like my entire life, because it was a doll that my grandmother actually played with. It was not considered creepy when she played with it, but that face has changed over the years, right? Like how we perceive that face. And I mean, I think ventriloquy for a little bit has come up with it because people do see that dummy as just kind of crossing over into something that is just a little too real. And then we also have things like the Talking Tina Twilight Zone episode and the many horror movies that I'm sure Adam could reference if he was here that have dolls that are the creepy villain. So it is a little much. It's certainly a different take on dolls than it was before.
Okay, so I have a few more questions about this specific doll before we move on to talk about that. First off, does it have like articulated limbs? Do the limbs move? I can't remember.
It does have a joint at the shoulder, at the elbow, and at the wrist.
Oh,
the fingers
nice.
themselves don't. They're frozen. And it does also have a joint at the hip and the knee. And I don't think it has one at the ankle. I'd have to double check.
Sure, that's okay. You don't need to go into the doll room right now.
Yeah, it's cool. The head can also move.
Okay. So that's very fancy.
Yeah.
Do you remember, like, did your grandmother ever talk about the doll and her relationship with it?
I don't remember my grandma ever talking about the doll. I remember the doll living in a closet in my house when I was growing up because my mom had the hardest time finding somebody who could repair the doll because the string system or band system that held all of the pieces together and let them articulate and stuff needed to be repaired or something like that. And you had to find somebody who could repair dolls that were like, 70 years old. And that's a real niche, right? And she had the hardest time finding somebody who could do it. And eventually she did. And that's when the eyes got glued open and everything.
There's a term for a place where you get your doll fixed called a doll hospital, which is just one of those phrases that several novelists have used to title their novels because it is so weird and evocative.
Yes. Yes, it is. Oh, my goodness.
Has there been any eerie incidents around the doll?
No. Honestly, no. There totally hasn't been. I'm not even going to make one up. I mean, but just the thought sometimes that there could be is really enough, right?
Oh, sure.
So, I mean, and there are plenty of, I'm trying to think, there's like an episode of some sort of like, maybe it's even like a Tales from the Dark Side or something like that, where there was a doll that if she didn't have her ribbon tied on, she could come alive. And the ribbon was the like witchcraft that kept her as a doll and not as a live being. So yeah, like every once in a while, I'll just look at the doll and be like, you got all your clothes on? Sweet. Sweet.
We should have a picture of the doll in question in the show notes.
Mm-hmm. I will happily provide one. And, it is amazing. I wonder if my mom ever found her as creepy as I find her. And I also sometimes wonder, like, why do I keep the doll? Because I do keep the doll, right? Like, I still own it. It's still in my house.
It sounds like a terrible idea to get rid of it. You're just asking for trouble.
There is also that. I mean, if Toy Story has taught me anything, like, you don't get rid of dolls.
Speaking of creepy dolls, do you know what a frozen Charlotte is?
Stop it. No.
A frozen Charlotte is a type of doll. It's one of those, it's a bit like your doll, but this is one of the reasons I was asking if it was articulated, because it is specifically one that is not articulated. It's all one piece. So it was a cheaper version of the fancy doll that your grandmother had. But dolls that were made, Wikipedia is telling me between about 1850 to 1920. They've got one pictured here in what looks halfway between a casket and a tub.
Oh my gosh, I have just Googled it and I see the same picture and I am creeped out.
It's named after a folk ballad about a girl named Charlotte who dies because she doesn't want to cover up her pretty dress on a cold sleigh ride, so she freezes to death.
Oh my gosh.
That is the kind of story that could make a ballad into a #1 hit, and I don't understand why pop music doesn't work that way anymore.
I'm shocked that there isn't a #1 hit. Should have been a #1 hit for somebody.
Is there any other kind of creepy doll thing that you want to share with the class?
I mean, the other thing that I thought of when this whole creepy doll thing was something that you and I were talking about, other than my own personal creepy doll, I think it was a podcast that I had listened to years ago, and I believe it was the podcast Lore by Aaron Mahnke. He did an episode where he talked about an island of dolls in which people brought dolls and they hung them from trees or they placed them in trees. And this was a real island, like it wasn't a made up thing. It's a place that you can go and visit where there are a lot of dolls. And I know that you looked up a little bit more information about it and that there was a great article from discovery.com that was talking about this specific island.
Yeah. I mean, it was a short article, but it had pictures that were terrible. And I was done researching that for now.
Well, if anybody wants to go see it, of course, TripAdvisor will show you how to appropriately visit. Apparently, it's in Mexico City. We'll have to link to some of these photos for our listeners to take a look at, but don't open it if you are creeped out by dolls, because this is, I mean, it's like dolls tied to trees and hanging from places.
Yeah. We'll also have a link to the website for the island itself, which has lots of more photos. And the other thing about these dolls, of course, is that they're outdoors on an island exposed to the elements, and they're all very sort of dirty and wearing away and
various stages of decay because people are still adding dolls to the island.
Yes.
It's not a frozen thing. It is not a frozen Charlotte, although there might be some frozen Charlottes there.
Anyway, if you're looking for a wedding venue and you're one of those kinds of people, I suppose, get in touch with them. I'm sure they can be very accommodating.
Sure, yeah. If your Anne Rice holiday in New Orleans hasn't gone the way you want it to, try this one out. Oh, Chris, I think we need to talk about the dorm references that come up inside of our riffers from the very beginning, in the sketches in the very beginning.
Sure.
Because I guess I know that there are a lot of stereotypes out there about what a dorm is like, but the stereotype that they're presenting of a dorm just being full of drunken, abusive boys hanging out of windows with speakers and music playing and everything, and screaming for girlfriends who have dumped them. This is not a stereotype that I was aware of. Is it one that you had heard of beforehand for the way that dorms were supposed to be?
It feels like something that I would expect to see in an 80s movie about people in dorms.
Maybe not dorms so much as fraternity houses, though, is the thing, you know?
Well, I mean, a fraternity house is sometimes just a very specific type of dorm, right?
I guess that's true. Sure.
Well, either way, if the dorm, whatever the sleeping arrangements are, end up being segregated, you're more likely to have these kinds of, I don't know, boys being boys in heavy quotation marks kinds of scenarios emerging.
Oof. Yes.
But that said, I didn't live in a dorm when I went to college. I lived in a house with my parents. So I didn't experience any of this. And I know that you went away for college, and I believe at least for some of that you were in a dorm.
I did. The school that I went to required that you live, you had to petition to not live in the dorm your freshman and sophomore years if you wanted to live off campus. And that had to be approved by the housing department. The college wanted everybody to have the opportunity to mix socially and to have access to all of the academic and social resources that were on campus, right? There was some fantastic thing. I mean, at the time I went, most people did not have their own computers. So they had computer labs prevalent in like every single one of the academic buildings. And the dorms were all a very short walk from those academic buildings. Our library was open 24 hours a day, which was fantastic. So you could go and access everything there. So being in the dorms meant you were on campus close by and all of those resources were available to you. And it also meant that you had these social interactions that a dorm has, which are, part academic support. I had many study groups from people who I lived in a dorm with, and we would meet inside of the central room in order to go through our physics homework and to study for a test or something like that, or even calculus, right? But I don't remember having large, drunken, yell out the window at people things happening in my dorms. And maybe I was just a little prudish and I missed it. I don't know.
I think the point of these kinds of parties is that you can't miss it.
Well, then they must not have happened then. I mean, my campus also had, they had dorms that were co-ed, but all of the rooms that were connected with a specific bathroom were single gender.
Right.
So I might be down the hall from somebody who was male, but everybody who used my bathroom in the adjoining rooms was female.
Right.
So, but there were dorms that were all female. Interestingly, there were no dorms that were all men. Other than the fraternity houses, obviously, but those were off campus and they're owned by the fraternities, right? Not by the college. So that's not college housing, that's fraternity housing.
Yeah. It's interesting because, of course, in terms of the episode, right, this is all Crow's and Tom's fantasy of what a college party would be like, right?
Although they do suggest that this is partly Mike's fantasy as well, because they're talking about to him, like, don't you want your beer, right? Don't you want your party with your beer? So, like, that part of it at least is coming from Mike.
I suppose, yeah. And certainly Mike is, excited when a little bit of beer arrives, thanks to the nanites. But, Crow can't actually get drunk. And isn't actually dating anyone named Debbie. Does actually break a window in the lore of the show. But.
Weirdly. Yeah. And the bots have allowance on the show? They can buy things? How can they buy things?
Well,
Okay, I'm sorry. It's just a show. I forgot.
I know, it is just a show.
It's
They
just a
do
show.
order things over the phone sometimes, is the thing. Now, how does it get up there? Well, they introduced the umbilicus at one point, but it's Roman times now, so that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't
Yes.
matter. It's just a show.
It's just a show.
But what I did like about all this was the moment at the end of it when Mike is like, do you ever fantasize about happy things?
Yes.
And Crow is like, I like the Debbie one more. And that's really interesting. That's one of the most interesting characterization notes about Crow that I've seen this entire season, is that he's really into the fantasy of being really, really upset.
It's true.
I love that for him.
I guess. I mean, Tom wants to be a toaster strudel and he lives out that fantasy.
Exactly. Everybody gets what they want except Mike.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he does have a beer, doesn't he?
He does get a beer, I suppose. That's true.
Dorms are just not like that, though.
Sure.
Dorms are not like that.
Dorms, from my experience, my major experience of dorms is when I was in my grad school, I would go to a conference that was held in Kalamazoo at a college there. And one of the options was to stay in the dorms, which were very concrete and spare and thinnest mattresses you ever did see. And some of my colleagues managed to bring home bed bugs at one point from it. And it was the most miserable accommodations, and I couldn't imagine anyone wanting to be there. I believe that they have finally started demolishing those buildings and building up new, better, more humane accommodations. But
I mean, you could just get some nicer mattresses. Yes. That is what a dorm looks like if you're just staying there during the summer when there's no kids there, right? Because kids are forced to take down, kids, by kids, I mean college students, right? They're taking down everything. They have to pack everything in their room up when they leave because that's not going to be their room next year, right? So all the posters are coming down. All of their bedding is leaving, which, you know, I brought a mattress topper with me when I went to college, right? But so there are no personal things inside of there. It is a chair, a desk, a bed, a mattress, a closet. And that's, you know, and two sets of that inside of the same room if you're in a double. So it's super bare if you're staying there. And I have stayed in there as an adult when I go to teacher conferences that take place at universities. They offer the same thing. And you can stay in the dorms, which is really inexpensive because the accommodations are not super swell. But that's like the bare bones of it, right? How you fill it out, I guess, depends a lot on the personalities of the people who are there. So I guess when I went to school, it just wasn't those personalities that they're portraying inside of those sketches. Like I just didn't have a bunch of drunken, abusive people who were running around screaming and breaking windows.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13, 13 mesmerizing facts about today's experiment, Devil Doll. Go, Chris, go!
the director of Devil Doll, Lindsay Shonteff, was born right here in Toronto. But after making his first film in Canada, a western called The Hired Gun, he moved to the UK. So I don't think Devil Doll counts as CanCon, but with Adam gone and a part of our Scaritage on permanent hiatus, I don't think we'll ever know for sure.
Bryant Halliday, who plays the Great Varelli, will be back to star in The Projected Man, Rift in Season 9. William Sylvester, who plays reporter Mark English, was in Riding with Death from Season 8, as well as Gorgo in Season 9, and in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, which not even Riff Tracks has riffed yet.
Okay, on to the references. During the opening credits, as Hugo rides in the backseat of a cab, Tom imagines him asking,
Am I a mod or a rocker?
This is a reference to the 1964 Beatles movie, A Hard Day's Night. A reporter asks Ringo if he's a mod or a rocker. He says, No, I'm a mocker. Oh, hey, that's the same year and the same London that Devil Doll was filmed in.
As you'd expect, there are a lot of jokes about other ventriloquist acts in this episode. So when that opening credits cab ride ends and the driver lets Hugo out, Crow has him saying,
We've arrived at the Knucklehead Smith residence, sir.
Knucklehead Smith was a puppet performed by Paul Winchell, who appeared on TV in the 50s and 60s as part of the kids' shows The Paul Winchell Show and Winchell Mahoney Time.
The Mahoney of Winchell Mahoney Time also gets a shout-out later in the episode. Marion is waiting to meet with Varelli, and Crow says,
"She's already had a torrid affair with Jerry Mahoney."
Jerry Mahoney was Paul Winchell's main puppet, though, like many ventriloquists, he brought a stable of characters to life.
If you aren't familiar with his puppetry work, you might know Paul Winchell from his later career in voice acting. He provided the voices of Dick Dastardly in various Hanna-Barbera shorts, Fleagle on the Banana Splits, Gargamel on the Smurfs, and Tigger, too.
In addition to puppetry and acting, Paul Winchell also studied medicine. He helped invent a few components for some early artificial hearts, and appropriately for today's experiment, he worked for a while as a medical hypnotist, which is apparently a thing you can do.
We also get a reference to Topo Gigio, as Tom has Varelli's assistant mutter,
Stupid Topo Gigio was stepping all over our lines, the bastard.
Topo Gigio is a mouse puppet who was very popular on an Italian kids show in the early 60s, who then became famous in the US because of his appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show, or because David Letterman, whose show was recorded in the Ed Sullivan Theater, really enjoyed saying the name Topo Gigio.
Before Hugo kills Varelli's assistant, Mike notes,
"You know, she's sleeping with Varelli, Edgar Bergen, and Sam Giancana."
Wow.
A lot of jokes about how funny it is when women have sex, huh? Anyway, Sam Giancana was a mobster, but Edgar Bergen was, of course, the ventriloquist behind Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snurd, who was incredibly popular on Bergen's radio program. I know we've mentioned this before, but yeah, this is a ventriloquy act that did great numbers on radio, where you really couldn't see his lips move.
Okay, stepping away from the puppets. At some point during Varelli's act, Mike wonders,
When does Mr. Lifto come out?
Mr. Lifto is part of the Jim Rose Circus, which became famous as part of Lollapalooza in the early 90s. Mr. Lifto was pierced in various places, tongue, ears, nipples, and his act was lifting very heavy weights from those piercings. His grand finale, lifting several pounds from a piercing in his downstairs ecological bit. Yipes!
The word dummy comes up a lot in this movie, and often gets a riff about Fred Sanford's son.
Got to have a look at that dummy.
Fred Sanford's son?
Just
Dummy.
If you didn't grow up watching 70s sitcom Sanford and Son, you still might be able to guess from this that Fred Sanford didn't use especially kind language towards his son Lamont.
Mike describes Varelli's assistant as both Debbie Harry in Better Days and as
Roy Clark, cross-dresser.
the obligatory casually transphobic Season 8 joke. Roy Clark was the host of Hee Haw, that country music variety show that lasted from 1969 to, 1997? Hee Haw was such a big deal in the 70s that Clark was a special guest on an episode of The Muppet Show.
Sandwiched between those two unfortunate Mike jokes is this riff from Tom.
And I said to my parents, is that all there is?
If you don't know Peggy Lee's 1969 hit, Is That All There Is? Well, do yourself a favor and follow the link in the show notes. It's one of the bleakest, most deliciously nihilistic songs ever to chart. I mean, it starts with a little girl bored by the sight of her house burning down, and only gets more extreme from there. Heck, we'll throw in a bonus link to PJ Harvey covering the song in one of her side projects. Enjoy.
And that's time. During the opening credits, I don't know if you caught this, Chris, as a cab comes to a halt, Mike says under his breath,
Stopping off for a pint of liver ice cream.
and this comes after a whole bunch of conversation about being in England and about the disgusting food in England and all those sorts of things. And that continues for the whole episode. But I wondered, what is the weirdest flavor of ice cream you've ever had?
So, I enjoy a good weird flavor of ice cream.
Excellent.
I had a friend in grad school who got into making ice creams the way that many people got into making bread during the pandemic. And she treated me with several interesting ice creams. The one I am most fond of thinking about was a pair of ice creams that went together.
Ooh, what were they?
One of them was olive oil, and the other was balsamic vinegar.
Ooh, that would be really interesting. I mean, especially considering balsamic vinegar is a little sweet, you know?
Exactly. And it really brought out the sweetness of it. Although I have to say, they both had a sort of downside, which is that if you ate too much of the olive oil ice cream, well, the olive oil ice cream was kind of heavier than you realized as you were eating it. So it would sit really heavy on your stomach. And if you ate too much of the balsamic vinegar ice cream, well, that's more acidic than you realize.
Oh,
so on your
yeah.
stomach, it just starts eating away at it.
So they needed to be eaten in combination as well as in moderation.
Exactly.
Nice.
But they were very nice.
Nice. I think the weirdest ice cream that I have ever had was in California. They have a garlic festival in the town of Gilroy, which is known for its garlic. And at the garlic festival, they have garlic ice cream.
Oh.
It is one of the featured things. And of course, for everybody, it's like a big old joke to go eat garlic ice cream, right? Because you're at the garlic festival and they have garlic everything. So of course they have garlic ice cream. And that was, as I remember, it was just a very, very strange flavor combination, right? Not at all what you would have expected for ice cream. And it's before, a lot of these, niche ice cream places have opened now. Like now it seems like there's all of these ice cream places Portland has like Salt and Straw, but there's places all over where you can get these very quote unquote weird, right? Unusual flavors for ice cream.
Sure. Not to turn this into a Salt and Straw ad, but I'm looking at what flavors they have right now, and that includes caramelized turkey and cranberry sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Pumpkin and ginger snap pie, which is not that weird. It's pretty great sounding.
Yeah.
Parker House rolls with salted buttercream, which, yes, please mail me some of that. And roasted peach and sage cornbread stuffing. Yes. The turkey one, I'm not so sure about.
I mean, I want to eat those things. I'm not sure that I need them in ice cream form, but I would totally be willing to take a taste of that for sure. And Salt and Straw in Portland is not the only like unusual flavor ice cream place that I've ever heard of. I grew up in the San Francisco area, and there is a place called Pollyanne's that has been there since my mother was a kid, right? So we're talking since the early 50s, and they always had just a huge number of different ice cream flavors. So many that it was hard to choose. And they have a wheel that you could spin that has, in each cardinal direction, a free square, and then everything else is one of their numbers. And I think they have over 50 different flavors available. So spinning the wheel was one way that you could decide what flavor you wanted to have because you couldn't decide from all the wonderful things that were there. And every time we would go, my father would always say, you have to take whatever comes up. You have to take it, even if it is vegetable flavored ice cream. Which they had, and I've had it, and it was good.
I bet it was, yeah. Was it a specific vegetable?
It was not. It was vegetable. Although I think it very much, it was green and orange, and it very much coated carrot for me.
Yeah.
However, avocado ice cream was another odd flavor that they had, and it was actually really good.
No, that makes sense. Things that are fatty tend to be really good in ice cream. That's why cheese is so surprisingly good in ice cream.
Who knew?
I've had several goat cheese and blueberry or whatever ice creams, and they're always extra delicious because the fat makes it extra rich. And if you like ice cream, it's because you like that mouthfeel.
It's true. It's true. But I mean, even in gelato form, that seems like it would be really delicious. Avocado gelato.
I know, I'm pretty sure you took me. I can't imagine who else did, but I've been to that ice cream shop in San Francisco. Did
you spin the wheel?
I can't remember. I must have. I knew about it, unless it was something that got me incredibly excited that I didn't want to risk it. I get really excited. An ice cream that I had a long, long time ago, sort of in the early 90s, and that I will get whenever I see it is black licorice ice cream, because I'm a dirty freak. And if they had something like that, I might have said, I'm sorry, I'm going to watch someone else spin the wheel, but I need to have this licorice ice cream.
Oh, yeah. So, and one of the things, Pollyanns is in a neighborhood where a lot of Asian people live and have grown up. And so they also have things that, white people might find weird or would have found weird, like 20 years ago. Now I think it's a little bit more normal, but like red bean ice cream or ginger ice cream.
Both good.
Yeah. But one of the things that and green tea ice cream as well, right?
Of course. Classic.
Classic.
Durian ice cream is the one that I think a lot of white people might still have.
That was what I was going to bring up. Pollyanns totally has durian ice cream and has since I was a kid. They have a durian milkshake.
Yeah.
So like it was one of the things that was always on the menu. And I look for it every time I'm there because I just want to make sure that somebody is still selling durian ice cream. Because I don't know if I would be able to find it in my regular grocery store. I might have to go someplace specialty.
Oh, I see durian ice cream and durian milkshakes in particular all the time on menus for restaurants here. And I haven't really ordered it. The only time I've actually had durian, and this is more shame me, I should give it another try, is and an ice cream that I got when we were living together in Queens way back in the day. I picked up a pint of durian ice cream at a very affordable price, and it was terrible.
Ooh.
And yet, like that may have just been bad ice cream. Like I don't want to. I know durian can be an acquired taste, but I don't want to. I shouldn't let that one ice cream incident taint everything, especially because I just bought it because it sounded weird. So if somebody actually said, "Hey, this is the good durian stuff," I should give that a try.
We need to find somebody who has a good recommendation for durian flavored items.
Exactly. I just suddenly remembered when I was a kid, when I was about 8 or something, I was visiting my relatives and my cousin talked about how, we're having pickle ice cream for dessert tonight.
Was he joking or did he mean it?
I was so disappointed.
Oh, Chris, I'm so sorry.
Now, I'm not sure that is a good idea, but as a kid who loved pickles and loved ice cream, the fact that somebody made pickle ice cream, to my mind, meant that there must be something to it.
I'm just going to say, I think it's probably really tasty. I think somebody should make pickle ice cream.
Oh, I also have to tell you about the other great ice cream that I had. This is just me fanning about ice creams that are good.
That's totally okay.
When I was in Ireland, there was a really great local chain of ice creams. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure I could find it if I wanted to. But they had 2 ice creams that paired together very nicely. There was a gin flavored ice cream and a tonic flavored ice cream. And I didn't realize I wanted my G's and T's to be in a cone, but
there you go.
But it was so good. It was so good ice cream.
Was it alcoholic or was it just flavored gin?
There was alcohol in it. I don't remember getting a buzz from it, but
okay. Huh.
They did warn you that it had alcohol in it, just in case that was an issue for you.
Yeah, fair enough. That's interesting.
And it was incredibly fresh cream ice cream, of course, because, Ireland.
Yeah, I just can't imagine like tonic in ice cream form. Like, would you ever order those 2 separately?
Tonic ice cream? I would try it. I like tonic is the thing. As a good tonic. If you're only familiar with like tonic that comes in cans from the grocery store from like big name brands, then you may not appreciate all the nuance that a good crafted tonic can have.
Fair enough. I'm going to have to look for my microbrewery tonic then.
I recommend it. And I also recommend, this may not be for you as well, but maybe give it a try sometime. This is not ice cream related. I guess you could have it with ice cream. Anyway, coffee, or specifically espresso with tonic water.
Whoa.
It's sort of like an Americano, but you're using tonic water instead of water.
I would never have thought to put those things together.
I wouldn't have either, but I went to a place that was doing it and I tried it because, again, they were serving it. So somebody must have thought this was a good idea.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. And now we make a little pot of morning coffee and then I have the warm bit. And then when it cools down, for my second cup, I will often mix it in with a bit of tonic water. And that's how I'll have my next bit. And it's delightful. Oh, all right. We can't have segments that often that are just getting excited about great food we've once had. I don't know how fun it is to listen to, but it's really exciting to talk about. So.
Well, I mean, we could talk about really bad British food, but I feel like the Riffers did that enough for everyone already.
Well, we talked a bit about Devil Doll, and then we talked a lot about ice cream.
We talked about my Devil Doll, to be specific.
We did. We also talked about that. Is there anything you want to say that was inspired by this episode before we click stop on our recording devices?
I do have something to share, Chris. And I mean, okay, so I don't want to always talk about how great my alma mater was. I mean, I know that Batman went there and, so did Dirk Benedict. But one of the coolest things about my school, and I got to meet this person, the gentleman who created Magic the Gathering, which gets a shout out in the riffs of this episode.
Let's play Magic the Gathering.
He was a math professor at my alma mater. And the year that I started school was 1993, which was just as Magic the Gathering was becoming more and more popular. And before the end of my freshman year of college, Richard Garfield had retired from teaching math and was no longer a college professor and was now more intrinsically involved with game production and, went forward inside of perpetuating Magic the Gathering and making it just this huge and involved creation that it is right now. And while I haven't ever played Magic the Gathering, everyone else inside of my household has, and we have boxes and boxes of Magic the Gathering cards, both old ones from the 90s and ones that have come out more recently. And there are folks inside of my household as well who play the online version of the game. Have you ever played it, Chris? Do you have Magic the Gathering stories?
I did play Magic the Gathering once back in the early 90s when somebody I was dating tried to introduce me to it. And I thought, that seems complicated. And I also know that it's a real money sinkhole, and I don't want to get involved with that right now. Other than that one time, all of the Magic the Gathering that I've played has been with people who live in your house. So I have played several other games Richard Garfield has designed because he keeps coming out with them, and many of them are pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
King of Tokyo is pretty fun. I never got into Netrunner the way that other people did, but and there was some video game that just came out that I was looking at that I haven't played, but that he was involved with. He's put out a bunch of stuff, though.
I'm not surprised. Like, Magic the Gathering is a really big and complicated game. And I mean, you're right, it is a bit of a money sinkhole because you do have to continue acquiring cards, and they retire old cards from being able to be in current play because they're, overpowered or whatever. And so you do have to keep up with the latest cards. So it is unfortunate as far as that goes for, people who have limited bank accounts.
Yes.
But you can do an online version. My understanding from the people who live in my household who play it, though, is that you have to be a really regular player in order to have any competitive cards. You just end up losing all the time to people who are either willing to sink a lot of money into it or who are willing to sink a lot of time into it.
Yeah, I was playing a similar game called Hearthstone, which is a digital collectible card game. I played that for a little while and sort of without spending money managed to get a reasonably good deck in what was then the current meta. And then the current meta shifted and I was like, oh, nah, I'm done. I don't want to go through that again. This is becoming work.
Mm-hmm. And for those people who are willing and have the time and the money to sink into it, I understand it's a really entertaining game. It's really fun, but you really do have to commit resources to it.
Exactly.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've got a favorite flavor of ice cream we might not have tried before, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at It Is Just a Show. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you and like our randomly selected supporter, Deborah. Thank you, Deborah. For as little as $1 an episode, you can be like Deborah and help us research and record this show. You can join us in a friendly Slack where we all hang out and live stream our reactions to new episodes. And you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/122. I hope our next episode does not have the need for a heavy content warning, Chris. Come on, tell me, what are we going to watch?
We are going to watch Season 4, Episode 3, City Limits.
Okay.
Which is one of the episodes that is going to be part of this year's Turkey Day Festival, or is currently when this episode drops, perhaps.
Nice.
So there'll be a nice, shiny, crystal clear new version of it for us to watch in terms of it being a 1080p restoration of the episode. Yeah, looking forward to that.
Nice. Do you remember this episode? Anything you can say to prep me for it?
I'm pretty sure you've seen this one before.
Ooh, good.
This is the one that you might remember because the Invention Exchange involves a Tupperware set made for pop stars in which you will find Morrissey.
Okay.
The movie takes place in a post-apocalyptic dystopia.
Oh, my favorite.
It's got Kim Cattrall and Robbie Benson and Ray Dong Chong and James Earl Jones and all these people.
Okay, well, wow. That'll be a Thanksgiving treat to remember then, I suppose.
Yes. But until then,
please, little fart, stay inside my dress.
I hope this episode gave you maximum shock sock. If not, listen to it again from the beginning. Take it away, Theme Squad.